The only reason the United States Senate is about to pass Build Back Better is because of you, because of your voices, because of your work, and apparently because of grandmothers. That seems like that's making the difference right now. I am so honored that you invited at least one grandfather. I'm one of them. But before we get to grandfathers, put your hand up if you're a grandmother. Thank you, grandmothers. Apparently, when we need to get things done around here, we have to make sure grandmothers are leading the fight. But I do want to mention that I am a grandfather, and my grandson Max is in California. So if you could just yell really loud, he might hear you. That's great. Because Max told me he wants Build Back Better passed. He believes, like you do, we all believe, that care can't wait. And I'll tell you, I like that the better formulation was grandmothers won't wait. But I do want to thank you for all the work that you're doing. This is about our country. This is about whether or not we're going to deliver on the promise of better care, better jobs, and a better future for our families. This is about lowering costs for families. You know, some people are running around Capitol Hill. You've got commentators and reporters and others saying, you know, this Build Back Better bill is so big and it's complicated and there's so many parts to it. But how do you talk about it? It's real simple. This is about lowering costs for families. That's why we want to make sure that families that have the child tax credit, getting a couple $100 extra every month, they can still get that in 2022 like they're receiving it now, right? About lowering their costs so that when they go to the grocery store, they can afford the food that they need. And by the way, the child tax credit is helping families afford the purchase of food. We know that a lot of families are paying more for care. It's not only backbreaking to provide caregiving, it's expensive for the family. And the federal government has to do more. That's why we're going to pass, as part of Build Back Better, the first ever investment in home and community-based services for seniors, for people with disabilities, and we're going to lift up the workforce. Those women who are doing that heroic essential work, those women who are mostly women of color, paid only $12 an hour. That's not the America we want. We want to make sure that we say to the world, care can't wait, we got to pass Build Back Better. Now, that brings us to where we are today. You're only a couple hundred yards from that building behind me. But the one side of that building did its job already. The House passed the bill. I'm on the side of the Capitol. Well, let's first clap for the House. We should do that, right? Sorry to interrupt those clapping, because my House colleagues would be mad at me if I did that. But now it's on our side, the Senate side. And we only have one party working on this, right? So far, I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's some kind of Christmas or holiday miracle. So far, it's only one party, the Democratic Party, working on this. The other side is checked out, right? Did they support the child tax credit in the rescue plan? No. Did they support the money that was the beginnings of the investment in home and community-based services? Nope. They didn't support that either. Did they support the provisions of this bill? They're not supporting it. So we talk about early care and learning, investments in child care and pre-kindergarten education. They're not supporting that, but we are, and we got to get it done. So we've got to get so much done for our families because people are hurting out there. People are still recovering from the pandemic. People are having trouble making ends meet. I mentioned folks using the child tax credit to pay for their groceries. They're also using that to pay for school activities that their children wouldn't be involved in unless that child tax credit and other help was allowing them to do that. So we have a lot of work to do, but one of the best ways to be inspired is not only to be here with you and to hear your voices and your stories, but to hear from folks back home. I'll give you one example. I had the privilege, and it is a privilege, to travel to my hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, which happens to be the hometown of President Biden. So we went up there in October, and he wanted to talk about a lot of things under the broad heading of Build Back Better. But as part of that, the president wanted to meet with some northeastern Pennsylvanians who have disabilities. So we had a chance to meet with folks at the end of his visit. And just before his visit was over, I was standing next to Brandon Kingsmore. Brandon is in a wheelchair, and I met him so many times before and heard his story that I wanted to make sure the president heard his story. But even more important than Brandon's story about himself, I wanted to make sure the president heard what Brandon had told me about his caregiver, Lynn. And Lynn, in so many ways, represents all the caregivers in this audience, all the caregivers in your families, all the caregivers across our country. So when we talk about Care Can't Wait, I'm thinking about what Brandon said. Here's what Brandon Kingsmore, just one American, but one American who's receiving the benefit of good care, in this case from Lynn. He said, and I'll quote him directly, and he told the president this just right next to, standing right next to him. He said, quote, "I would not be able to have the life that I have without Lynn." And then he said this, he said, "They give us a substantial life. They give us a substantial life." He was talking about caregivers, that the caregiver is giving that substantial life to Brandon and so many others all across our country. So when the president was listening to Brandon, you could see the impact it was having. He was thinking about the caregivers that have helped his family long before he was president. He was thinking about the caregivers in this audience and all across this country. So President Biden knows, and Vice President Harris knows, that care can't wait. Brandon and Lynn know that care can't wait. You all know that care can't wait. And now that I'm informed that grandmothers won't wait for that caregiving to land in a Senate bill, we have to get to work. All I can say to you, other than to say thank you, is to plead with you to keep up the fight.